All right, welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to get into this really powerful argument from the Quran. It tackles a question that people have debated forever, right? Is just having faith enough to be saved? Or do our actions ultimately decide our fate? It's all about divine justice, hypocrisy, and what it really means to live an honest-to-God life of faith.
So where does this whole thing start? Well, it kicks off with a pretty bold claim. I mean, someone says something that gets a major response from the Quran. And even though this story is from a long, long time ago, the question it asks, wow, it's about who actually has to answer to God's law. And that's something we still think about today, for sure.
Okay, so first up, a claim to immunity. Let's dig into this claim of special treatment that really gets the ball rolling.
Okay, so the Quran brings up this group of people, and they're making a pretty wild claim. They're basically saying, hey, for us, sin isn't that big of a deal. They think they get a special pass, like they're exempt from the real punishment and will only face a slap on the wrist, some temporary penalty, and then they're good to go.
And this right here, this is the heart of what they're saying. They believe that just because of who they are, maybe their family background or their group, they're spiritually bulletproof. They think they won't face the same forever consequences that everyone else does.
Now, the Quran doesn't just let that slide. No way. It comes right back with a huge challenge. It basically says, okay, hold on. Where did you get this idea? Did God himself make you an unbreakable promise? Or are you just making this up? Are you inventing things and putting words in God's mouth? It's a really sharp question.
So, what's the comeback? Well, the Quran doesn't just say, you're wrong. It does something much bigger. It lays down a universal law, a rule for justice that applies to absolutely everyone. No exceptions.
And the response is crystal clear. The Quran says, look, it all comes down to what you do. It's about your actions as an individual. If your whole life gets wrapped up and consumed by sin, well, there's a clear consequence for that, the fire, and it's eternal.
But, of course, there's another way. The Quran is super clear that getting to paradise isn't about what group you belong to. It comes from putting two things together, what you truly believe on the inside and then backing it up with good, righteous actions on the outside. That combo, that's the universal recipe for paradise.
So here's the bottom line. The Quran just completely tears down this idea of special treatment, and in its place, it puts up this single universal standard of God's justice. What matters is what you do in your life and what's in your heart. It's not about your tribe or your family name.
Okay, but the argument doesn't stop there. To really drive the point home, the Quran does something brilliant. It doesn't just state the rule. It reminds the people listening of a huge promise they themselves had already agreed to.
It specifically brings up the covenant, the big agreement that God made with the children of Israel, the one laid out in the Torah. And this wasn't some vague handshake deal, It was a detailed contract, a blueprint for how to live.
And just look at what was in this contract. It starts with the big one, worship only God. But then, look how fast it moves into how you treat other people, being good to your parents, to the poor, speaking kindly. It's a whole plan for a good and just society. But here's the kicker. The verse points out that most people just turn their backs on it.
This agreement also had two absolutely fundamental rules for keeping the peace. Don't kill each other and don't kick people out of their homes. Simple, right? And the verse makes this really important point. They knew it. It wasn't a secret. They agreed to it. They witnessed it.
All right, so this is where it all comes to a head. The stage is set. We have the universal law, and we have the reminder of their own specific promise. Now, the Quran pulls back the curtain on a huge, glaring contradiction in how they were actually living.
And the accusation is just blunt. It's saying, you're the ones breaking this promise. You kill your own people. You drive them from their homes. You gang up on them. I mean, this is a total violation of the very thing they just agreed to.
And this is where the hypocrisy just becomes impossible to ignore. Look at this. They're breaking the biggest rules in the book. Don't kill, don't make people homeless, but at the same time, they're following another rule from their scripture, the one about paying ransom to free their own people who've become captives. Think about that. They were breaking the really tough laws, but following the ones that were easier or more convenient for them.
And that leads to the Quran's central, knockout question. This is it. This is the core of the problem, a faith that's based on convenience. It's about picking and choosing which parts of God's law you want to follow based on what suits you, right? Ignoring the hard stuff and only doing the easy parts.
So what's the price for this kind of hypocrisy?
For saying you believe one thing but doing another? Well, the Quran is very, very clear about the consequences.
The penalty comes in two parts. First, here in this life, it leads to disgrace, to humiliation. But then, in the hereafter, it's not just any punishment. It's the worst kind of punishment. Because this wasn't just a mistake. It was a conscious decision to twist and corrupt their own faith.
So, what are we supposed to take away from all this? The big message is pretty clear. You can't separate true faith from good, consistent actions. They have to go together. It's an all-in commitment, not a buffet where you pick what you like. You just can't say you believe in God while at the same time ignoring His most basic rules about justice and kindness.
And that kind of leaves us with a big question to think about, doesn't it? This isn't just about some group from the past. The challenge here is for all of us, right now. What does it actually mean to live your faith with sincerity? How do you make sure that what you do matches what you say you believe, without cutting corners or making excuses? That's really the question at the very heart of this whole thing.